Hi everyone! I know it's been a really long time since I last uploaded a video. I apologize to those who subscribed to my channel and expected to see regular content. If you watched my last videos, you've probably noticed that I had a problem with my camera properly focusing on things. It could only focus on a really small area at a time. I was really upset about this during editing my last videos, and that's why I was a bit discouraged from filming anything at all, because I didn't want to upload bad quality videos. I have a new camera now, and hopefully it means that the quality will improve a bit. It's the first time I'm filming using my new camera, so fingers crossed that it will be better. And since I abandoned my channel a bit, it was really difficult to decide what to film and how to go back, but very conveniently and unexpectedly, I've just received a parcel from China that I can unbox on camera. I literally just collected it about 1 hour ago. This is a parcel from a Chinese brush maker. They contacted me on Instagram several weeks ago and offered to send me some of their brushes for me to test and review them. I've never tried them before and I don't even remember what's in this parcel, so it will be a very impromptu unboxing and testing video. Let's open the parcel and see what's inside. They are damaged a little bit, but to be honest, I'm not really fussy about this kind of stuff. So if a box was damaged a bit during shipping and transportation, it's not a big deal for me, because I'm probably going to get rid of these boxes anyway, unless I decide to use them for storing something. But even in this case, it doesn't really matter for me how the box looks like. So the name of the company is Golden Maple, and as I said, they are produced in China. And by the way, I will leave a link to their website in the description, so if you want, you can check their brushes too. So judging by their website, they have some cheap brushes, but at the same time they offer some more expensive brushes. They offer a wide variety of different prices, so their price range varies a little bit. They don't position themselves as a luxury brush maker, as powder brushes in Europe, for example, or silver brush in the US. I would say that they are somewhere in the middle. They're not cheap, like they're not crazy cheap, but also they are not very expensive. The brushes look very interesting and presentable. Like they definitely look different to what we are used to. So for example, here is the simple synthetic brush that I use, and its handle is completely different from this one. Or you can see, like, these are my regular brushes and all of them look very different. And what I mean by that is these wooden handles. Usually brushes are quite thin, and to be honest, when the brush is really thin, it's not very convenient. Like, I don't know about you, of course, I think it's very personal, but for me, having a very, very thin brush is not very convenient. I remember I used the really, really thin brush. It was thinner than any of those. And I remember how my hand was getting, like how my fingers and how my wrist was getting really tired while I'd been using this brush, because it was really thin. So I think this one should feel really great in your hand, and it shouldn't give you any uncomfortable feelings, and your hand should not get tired because of holding this brush. It would also be interesting to see how durable this wood is, because in watercolor you work with water, which means that your brush will constantly get wet, and usually it's not very good for wood. I hope that this will prove to be a good handle. As it says on the cover, this is a miniature fine detail brushes. I'm not really a fan of small details. I tend to buy the brushes that can be a bit multifunctional. I usually tend to use brushes like this, like size 8. And by the way, if we are talking about sizes, I think the sizing system is pretty common, it's pretty standard. Because obviously every manufacturer can label their brushes as they want. There are no rules to that. There are only some common standards, and I would say that this is very close to these unofficial standards. That is how you would expect a brush size 8 to look like. Yeah, so this is size 8, and this is my Escoda size 8. Maybe this one just a bit thinner, so maybe it's closer to... No, it's not closer. It's probably like size 7, I think, if we are comparing it to Escoda. If you are ordering their brushes separately and you are looking for a specific size, you can just trust the common sizing. So I think out of all of these sizes, I will probably end up using these 4 brushes maximum, and these ones are not very convenient for me. I don't have any use for it because I really like working on bigger formats these days. As I was saying, that when you buy a good size 8 or size 6 brush, and if it has a very fine point, you would be able to do all the details with this brush. You don't really need to have any smaller and thinner brushes unless you are working on really small formats and you are painting miniatures or something like that. So these brushes would be very convenient for you. I don't know, maybe I will do a giveaway and I will give these brushes away to someone who needs it more than me. Let me know if you would be interested in receiving these brushes as part of a giveaway. That's why I think I will not even be testing them today, because if I'm going to give them away, I want them to be new and unused. The next box. I really like it when manufacturers package their products nicely. You are the artist of your life, and that's true. This one feels a lot more luxury. I will check the price and put it on screen for you just to compare how expensive this is. It's very weird how they put a protection around this brush, because you can see that the point of this brush is sticking out of this protection. So I don't know if it was an accident, or I don't know if they didn't think about this properly or what, but it's very weird. It doesn't mean that it's going to be ruined, by the way. Sometimes you just have to wet your brush and it will be okay. We will see. If the hair is going to stay damaged, that would be a real shame, because this brush looks very, very nice. So I think maybe if I decide to do a giveaway, I will give this box away. Let's test these 5 brushes. I have a jar of water and I'm going to pick up some paper as well. I will be testing these brushes on my etcher pad, 50% cotton, I think. Yes, 50% cotton, 300 GSM paper. I've already mentioned several times that I don't really like this paper, and I don't really like 50% and any half papers in general. I mean, they're still usable, but I still have to use some paper for swatching and for videos, and this is the paper that I prefer to swatch on rather than swatching on some expensive paper that I can actually use for my artworks too. I just picked up a random color from my case, and it is going to be Magnolia White Nights color. I wanted to use something relatively cheap and something that I don't really use that often. And we are going to start with this squirrel brush. Usually, when you get a new brush and its hair covered with this special glue, they do it to make sure that all the hair, they are stuck together and they look presentable and also protected before you start using this brush. When you just get your new brush from the shop, you need to put it into water and let it soak a little bit. So don't try to squeeze your brush with your fingers, or just be very careful with it, because you can permanently damage your brush and it will not fulfill its purpose. You have to be very careful. Just let it soak for a bit. I think I've heard that some artists advise to wash it with some soap before you actually use it for the very first time, to make sure that you remove this glue completely. But I think it's okay. So yeah, now it looks very, very soft. You can see that this brush is very soft. I mean, it's probably a natural squirrel. It feels like a natural squirrel, so I don't think it's synthetic. Let's try it. We are going to test its ability to gain and retain water, because that's the main purpose of any squirrel or squirrel imitation or any other soft brush. We use it for large washes because we want to make sure that we cover our page properly and our wash looks nice and it doesn't have faults. So this is a very important brush. Usually artists spend a lot of money on a good squirrel brush because it's that important for your art. You are a watercolor artist, and if you work on anything starting from A5, A4, you would need a good squirrel brush, because I think only those watercolor artists who work in miniature, they will be able to do without this brush. This is how much you will be able to cover in one stroke without putting your brush into your paint once again. Let's compare it to something else. I think it would be fair to compare this brush to another real squirrel hair. I don't think I have a lot of real squirrel brushes. I mainly have squirrel imitation, like I have this one, but I think it's bigger, so it would be unfair. Okay, all my soft brushes are either squirrel imitations or they are much bigger than this one. Still, I think for comparison reasons, we are going to take this Skoda Ultimo size 10 brush. It's synthetic, so it's not real hair, and it is a bit bigger, so we have to consider this. But I just want to see how it compares, because it's really difficult to say how well this brush performed. And usually Skoda brushes are considered to be one of the best brushes on the market. So let's see. Actually, if you are using squirrel imitation brushes, they require a bit more soaking before you can actually use them in your artworks, because I think it takes a bit more time to prepare fibers for work rather than natural brushes. That's why it's so difficult to stop using natural brushes, especially natural squirrel brushes or like goat brushes, because they are objectively better. I think brush makers are now working on creating a really good synthetic soft brushes for big washes, so artists can switch to using vegan art supplies without losing in the quality of art materials. I think you can compare it on your own, like you can see the result. I would say that this brush performed a bit better. I mean, it is larger, so we have to consider that it is slightly larger than this golden maple brush, but it's also synthetic, which means that it is expected to perform a bit worse than a natural squirrel brush. So I think, I mean, they are pretty comparable. I think this brush did relatively well. I will also put the prices on the screen because it will be interesting to compare the prices of these two brushes. Maybe if this one is a lot less expensive than this one, then yes, we can explain it through the price as well. Like if it's relatively cheap, then it would be a good value for money. And by the way, look at the point. Yeah, so as I said, even though we saw at the beginning that the point looked a bit damaged because it wasn't completely covered with protection, when we soaked it in water, it looks fine now. And I think it can give you a pretty fine line too. I mean, obviously, we don't really buy soft brushes because we want to get thin lines. No, that's not the case. But still, sometimes even when you do large washes, you have to cover and you have to get into some really small areas, and it would be really nice if your wash brush can handle these situations too. And now for these synthetic medium size brushes, usually if you are a watercolor artist, and I mean, it doesn't really matter which format you use, but especially if you are sketching or you are working on some smaller formats like up to A3, this would be your go-to brush for any details, and you would work, like maybe you would complete 60-70% of your work using this brush. I mean, unless you're working in some abstract manner, then maybe you would use larger brushes. But if you're working in a standard technique, you would use this brush for details, for some smaller washes, and so on. Let's start with the smaller size. I'm going to start with size 3. First of all, we are going to do the same test. For me, it's really hard to compare this brush to something else because I don't really own any small... Yeah, I don't think I have anything comparable to this brush. Let's test how thin this brush... Oh yeah, it's very thin. I think it's much more important for these kind of brushes to hold their point rather than to be able to cover a large area in one wash. It's really nice when your brush can do both. That's your perfect brush, like you found your perfect brush. But I would say that for detail brushes, it's a bit more important to be able to do fine details and fine lines rather than cover large areas. Okay, so this was number 3. Let's do number 4 now. Okay, is it just me or... Okay, yeah, here it's a bit better. Yeah, but because I started thinner. Okay, let's test how thin it can get. Yeah, also pretty thin. Also another thing, it will be interesting to see how long it can stay like that. So how long it can retain its fine point. Because a good brush should be durable. You should not have to replace your brush every month. If I decide to implement any of those brushes in my regular day-to-day art practice, I will update on Instagram and say how it's doing in a couple of months. Number 6. Okay. Okay, it's doing pretty well. Yeah, I mean, probably all of these brushes are going to have very, very fine point, which is great. Another question is how long it's going to stay like that, but it will be impossible to check in this video. Yeah, these ones are doing better. Okay, this was number 6. This is one of those brushes that I can actually use in my everyday practice. And the last one, the most promising brush for me, number 8. Yeah, it's okay. Let me get a Skoda Perla, number 8. And one more, because you can see that they have different hair types. I think they have a Skoda Prado. I don't think that they use the exact same type of hair. Okay, I think they are pretty comparable. So we looked at all size 8, a Skoda Prado, a Skoda Perla, and Golden Maple size 8. I would say this one is the softest. Yeah, if it's the softest, it means that it's logical that it will retain and it will hold more water than those brushes that are a bit less soft. I think it's called absorption, yes. So they absorb more water than harder brushes. So they think they are assessed by hardness and absorption. These brushes are unable to cover any extensive areas. Let me see if this is the case for everything. I don't know, like when you work, you don't really pay attention to things like that. Yeah, it's kind of the case for everything, I think. So it's normal. Yeah, we didn't test how thin they are. Yeah, also pretty thin. These Skoda brushes have been with me for a really long time. I haven't been using them like every day. These are not my everyday brushes. I use them regularly, but not every single time. By the looks, this one is able to absorb a lot of water, but at the same time you can see that its point is not as thin as the golden maple one. So it will be a bit more difficult to control how thin your lines will be comparing to this golden maple brush. So it's always the choice. What is more important for you? Fine point or absorption? Okay, so that was the last brush, number 8. What can I say? I think these are good brushes. Yes, so I tested them in front of your eyes and I compared them to Skoda brushes, which I consider to be one of the best brushes on the market. I've been working with Skoda brushes for a really long time, and yes, they are truly great brushes. They are good quality, but they are expensive. Yeah, because they also have a nice design. They don't crack because they use something to protect the wooden handles to make sure that your brush doesn't crack. But all of these result in a high price. These brushes, straight out of a box, they also look nice and promising. So they feel comfortable in your hand. They have a fine point. They can absorb water well, and they look durable. It's another question how long they will last. I cannot test this in this video, in this first impression unboxing video. Obviously, only time will tell how durable they are and how reliable they are. I think I will update my information on them on Instagram in a couple of months. I think I will include this brush into my everyday art practice just to see how well it performs. So what I'm going to be looking at is the durability of the handle, of the wooden handle, and how well it can handle water and being like almost always wet, and how long it can retain its fine point. Yeah, because any brush, any thin brush at some point will lose its characteristics, so it will not be able to produce thin lines. But how quickly it happens is another question. Usually, if the brush is good, then it will retain its fine point for longer. If you care for your brush, if you use it in the correct way, if you put your brush into your palette in this way and not in this way, then your brush will serve you a bit longer. Also, if you don't leave your brush in water for a very long time, if you clean your brushes regularly, then obviously it's going to serve you a lot longer. I would say maybe like half a year, maybe a bit less. Obviously, if you paint every day for 8 hours, it's not going to serve you half a year. Maybe it's like 2 or 3 months. These are just my personal observations. Obviously, maybe your observations will differ from mine, and it's okay. So if you have a completely different opinion on this topic, let me know in the comments. So overall, I can say that these brushes look promising. I think they are good value for money because they are not super expensive. I look forward to using them in my art practice, and I look forward to seeing how they will perform in 3 to 4 months, let's say. So let's give them 3 to 4 months. If something happens to them quicker, I will make sure to let you know on Instagram, if you follow my Instagram. And I think, yes, I will include these two brushes in my brush case, like in my everyday brush case. So once again, I will leave all the links in the description. Let me know if you are interested in this giveaway of smaller size brushes. And I hope that this video was interesting for you and maybe even helpful. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that I will upload a new video relatively soon.